Hey, I just want to thank you for being a part of the conversation. Let's do some pod crashing. Episode number 233 is with Wes Kosova from The Big Take.
Nice to meet you, Ara.
Hey, nice meeting you too. What is it in your heart that says that it's a Thursday? What's that identifier? What happens?
The calendar says Thursday.
Well, I have to trust it because I live a Google Calendar lifestyle, man. If there's a blank spot on that calendar, we've got to fill it with something.
I hear you. It usually gets filled up without me knowing, and I'm like, oh God, I have to do that.
Well, with you hosting a daily podcast, I mean, you definitely keep busy because I'm in the same boat that you are, and there's a schedule, but there's also a discipline. What is your discipline to make sure that you don't spend 18 hours in a studio?
It's funny. Since this is new as a podcast, and I'm new to podcasting, I'm learning discipline. At first, it was, not easy because I would want to just, kind of like pray over every last thing. And, I needed to kind of get a little bit more disciplined about that.
Oh, yeah, because, I mean, there are times, like when I'm talking with people in Ukraine and things, and it's like, you're doing an interview at 9, 10 o'clock at night, and you're going, God, what?
Yes.
I got to become that person again. Holy crap, how am I going to do that?
Yeah.
The subjects that you pick, is it something that hits you as you're walking about, taking like a little transition walk, or is it something that, like when you're surfing the news, you're going, that's my subject today?
Let me just ask you, are we getting started, or are we just chit-chatting right now?
No, we're actually doing it, man. That's my favorite kind of podcast is sitting down having a conversation. I don't interview anybody. I just want to have a conversation.
I didn't know if, because I was, just doing radio station, so I didn't know whether we were going or if we were just kind of talking beforehand.
No, that's yeah. No, that's always been my favorite thing about podcasting is the fact that it's like if we were to meet at a Starbucks, we're just gonna have a conversation, and that's what I love about your podcast is that you create the conversation, you create those moments at a Target store when you go, hey, look, man, did you hear what they were talking about on The Big Take?
Yeah, well, I would love for that to happen.
Well, you pick the subjects that do make it happen. I'll tell you that. I mean, look at what we're doing with streaming. I mean, you hit me square in the eyes when you picked up on that because you made me think, am I spending more money with those apps than I was with cable?
Well, it's funny because it started because one of our journalists, Felix Gillette, had co-written this book about the history of HBO, and we were sitting around, kind of the producers of the podcast, and we were sitting around trying to talk about, okay, so how do we tell this story? And we all started talking about what a pain in the neck TV was, that the shows were better than ever, so TV was kind of like better than ever. And yet at the same time, it was this kind of giant hassle to try to figure out where any of those shows are because they're all on different services and all of them want a separate fee. And we thought, well, why don't we just do the show about that? Because if we're all talking about it, maybe other people are too.
Yeah, because I mean you're right, and the thing is that it's because we do that in radio. When I was growing up through the ranks of terrestrial radio, is that we were looking for the water cooler conversation. What was everybody talking about? Because we had to take it to the intro of that next song, so that people would tune into us because they felt like that we were up to date.
Yeah, that's right. And, what we're trying to do with this podcast is a little different than other news podcasts in that it's not kind of this just in, this is the news that's happening right now and what's happening. Bloomberg and a lot of other news organizations do that really, really well. And so what we were trying to do is take a look at stories that aren't like the news, but that are in the news, of the news, maybe asking a question, that people really want to know the answer to. And so every day, Bloomberg does this big story called The Big Take. It's like a print story, which is sort of like that. It's a big original piece of reporting. It tells you something new. Maybe it's surprising, a whole new perspective on things. And so oftentimes what we'll do is use that story as a launching pad, kind of to do an exploration of that topic. And we talk to our reporters who are everywhere around the world. Bloomberg's this giant news organization. We've got expert reporters everywhere. So, there's somebody who is an expert on almost every subject under the sun somewhere in the world. And then we talk to people outside the newsroom, the experts and people in the news, people making the news. And it's just been a lot of fun doing this.
So do you have somebody that you rely on? Like, for instance, like sometimes the custodian is a great news sharer as well, because they pick up on everybody else's stories because everybody else in the building is talking to them.
It's a funny thing is, one thing that kind of working from home which I've actually been, I've kind of liked having that mix of working at home, working in the newsroom. One of the things that working at home I've found doesn't do so well is just what you're talking about, that kind of thing where you bump into somebody, you strike up a conversation, and you get to just feel for what people are thinking, because when you have to have all those conversations over Zoom and they're all scheduled, that you don't have that kind of spontaneity. And so being able to bump into people and just talk about, hey, what are you working on? What are you thinking about? Like as a journalist in a newsroom, which is, if you don't work in a newsroom, maybe you don't know that it's really just this big open space with a ton of desks, and everybody is just working away and everyone's just kind of bumping into each other and talking, and journalists loves to talk. And so when you bump into somebody, you just say, hey, what are you working on? Yeah. And then they tell you their story because everyone's excited about what they're working on. And that, hey, what are you working on, often becomes, the story, because somebody is excited what they're working on, and they're onto something cool and they want to tell people about it.
Well, you ask very important situations and questions on the podcast in the way that, the middle class right now, we're all sitting here thinking that it's the end of the world. And you're saying, why are we worried?
Well, this is a really interesting story. Sean Diamond, who's an economics writer, along with Alex Tanzi and Clara Ballantyne and Ariel Lowe, all these reporters at Bloomberg, they set out to, really look at the middle class. We all think about the middle class as, kind of like the backbone of America, and it's always been aspirational. Everybody kind of wants to be middle class, and politicians all curry favor to middle class. Like the whole culture is centered around kind of middle class. And they were looking at, what does that actually mean now? We got high inflation. It's hard to keep up with, prices of everything. Rents are high. It's hard to buy or sell a house. What does it mean to be middle class right now? And they did this deep exploration, and we had this kind of long, really interesting conversation. And that's one of the things that we're trying to do on this show is, like the news just coming at you like crazy all the time. There's so much going on. And of course, because we all have our phones, it's all coming to us all the time. And what we're trying to do is like just hit the brakes a little bit and say, for the next 25 minutes, we're going to talk about one thing that matters in plain English, and not be bombarding you and beating you over the head. We're just going to actually talk about something, like think about it, ask questions, like take a moment. And that's been a really interesting and fun thing to do.
Well, I'm glad you're saying talking, because that's one of my mantras on iHeart, is the fact that I always say we're just creating conversations out of conversations, which is going to create more conversations. Because, the texting and writing emails, if I'm reading it, I'm not getting the proper inflection, pitch, volume, and tone. So I'm glad that you are locked in on, the talk, creating that conversation.
Yeah, and this is a whole new thing for me, because I spent, 30 years as a print journalist. And my natural thing is I sit down at a keyboard and I type out words.
Yeah.
And it's a whole different thing doing that when you're trying to speak it instead of write it. And trying to make that interesting, informative, in a way that people want to take some time out of their day to listen to, really feel kind of like this responsibility. If I'm going to try to claim somebody's time, we don't have a whole lot of time these days, then I have to give them something that's worth their time.
So how do you put the shows together, the episodes and stuff like that? Do you have an army of people that are doing it, or are you in that studio going, okay, this is what's going to happen, I'm going to drop it, I'm going to promote it, this is what we're going to do for tomorrow too?
No, I am very lucky when it comes to starting a podcast, because Bloomberg and iHeart really went all in on this, and we have a team of people. We have producers where I am here in Washington, D.C., in New York, and in London. We have sound engineers, and they are a brilliant group of people who make me look way, way better than I actually am. Because, I'm not being this isn't false modesty. I'm sitting there talking to the microphone, and I'm interviewing people, and I hope I'm doing a good job. But as you know, because you do this, it's then when you take all of that conversation and you edit it,
yep,
so it does respect people's time. So you cut out the stuff that just, it wasn't that interesting, or me just saying dumb stuff or flubbing a sentence, and make it into something that's worth listening to. And also putting a lot of thought and care, the producers, into, who we talk to, and pulling in other clips and other pieces of sound to give context. All of that is a massive team effort. And without it, it would never ever happen. So I am one cog in this machine, and I am just really grateful for our team. Well,
you planted a big seed when you did the podcast on the Mississippi, because I've never ever thought about what happens if that monkey dries up. This nation is going to suffer in a huge way.
You know, what's so funny about that podcast is I thought it was super interesting because I don't live along the Mississippi. Certainly, I think of the Mississippi as this great American river, and of course, it's very storied. And we think of Mark Twain and Walt Whitman and all that kind of stuff. And I knew that it was like a waterway for goods and services, but I never realized just how important the Mississippi is. Like 1 trillion pounds of goods go down a year, and like 14% of all goods that travel around America go down the Mississippi. And the thing is drying up because it's low waters and there's been a drought, and throw a little climate change in there. And I thought it was really interesting, but I thought, I don't know, like there's a lot going on. Are people really going to listen to an entire episode about the Mississippi River? And I've gotten more feedback about that episode where people said they thought it was so interesting, they'd never thought about it that way. And that was eye-opening to me because I have to really expand my own thinking and be like, people are really interested in a lot of stuff, and it doesn't just have to be the stuff that's front and center on cable news and the things that everybody is doing. That people really do want to kind of hear about things that they don't think about every day.
Yeah, because I'll tell you what, Wes, the type of podcast that you've created here with Bloomberg and iHeart this is the stuff that I listen to when I drive to work. I don't want to hear top 40 songs all the time. I want to hear something that I'm going to put into my heart as content. And you talk in a way and you share in a way that really does, help feed that monster inside of me.
Well, thank you. I appreciate you saying that, because that's what we're trying to do. And we're trying to keep the show, with some exceptions, to about, 26, 27 minutes. So that when you think about how much time do I have, you look at it and you say, yeah, that fits my commute, my workout, walking the dog, whatever the heck it is you're doing. And not being like, okay, this thing is 50 minutes long or 55 minutes long. And there's nothing wrong with that. A lot of great podcasts are that long. But when it comes to a daily thing where we're trying to say, hey, would you make this part of your day, we have to realize that people only have so much time. And I don't want people to look at it and say, oh, yeah, that looks like a really interesting podcast. I'll listen to it later. And then later is never. So we try to be really disciplined to keep it focused, to make sure that it's respecting people's time.
Oh, and I so respect you for that. Where can they go to find out more information about you? Because, like you said, you're just getting into the podcasting, but you've got a history when it comes to true journalism. So where can they go to find out more about you?
Oh, gosh. I have no idea. I suppose you could go onto Bloomberg's website. I think there may be some bio of me on on any of the podcast platforms, but I don't know. I've never been. This is kind of a weird world for me, because I've never been the guy kind of in front of the microphone. I've always, I've let the story speak for me. Now, I'm speaking for me, so I don't have a whole, me PR thing.
Oh, it's going to be so fun to watch you grow, because your life is going to change, dude. I swear to you that when you get out there and people start recognizing you for your voice, your emotions, your connection, I just can't wait to watch you grow.
Well, thank you. I really appreciate that. I would love to see if, this does kind of strike a chord and people really start listening. It's early days. We have really good listenership numbers, but of course I want to reach as many people as possible. So I really hope it is something that people want to listen to and find valuable, because there's a lot of podcasts out there, and we're coming in here and say, hey, listen to us too. And so I kind of feel like we got to have something that's worth listening to, because unlike the early days, where anyone's holding up an iPhone and they had a podcast, people are really picky now, and they should be. They have a lot of choices. They have high demands. They don't have a lot of time. And there's an expectation that if you're going to put something out there and ask people to listen to it, that it better be good. Absolutely.
Well, please come back to this show anytime in the future. The door is always going to be open for you.
Arrow, thanks a lot. This was really fun. I enjoyed talking to you.
Well, you be brilliant today, okay, sir?
I'll try my best, man.